Hello everyone, the dynamic road system has been updated today and with it, a lot of new features. So let me do a quick fire of the major ones. Road lines have been overhauled to a new system. A new blueprint is introduced that allows you to do actions that affect all roads. We now have better OSM integration. We have new options that will dramatically speed up the use of the road system, which can be extremely useful if you're using an older computer system or have a massive road system. And lastly, baking options favor nanite support. These sections will be split up using timestamps in the video so you can see which features you're interested in. I want to also add, if you are updating a project that used the last version of this road pack, I recommend making a copy of your project before updating, just in case something doesn't convert well or you don't like a specific change. While we do test for compatibility, the dynamic road system is very dynamic, and once an update is applied to a project, it's very hard to roll back, which is why a project copy is useful. Alright, on to the update. Let's start with the biggest feature, which is the road lines. Let's drag in a new road and scroll down to the Road Markings Options panel. By default, no lines are shown, so I'm going to enable Show Center Lines and Show White Lines, and it automatically creates the lines you would expect. But if you look at the Details panel, you may have noticed that the variable named Road Lines was changed. It now has 4 mapped elements, and each is a separate line. We can expand the map and see that it has names associated with each of the lines. Let's say we want a road that has no white line on the right side. So we can go into the edge right line and press disable, and now it's gone. I'm going to re-enable it to show some of the other features like shifting. If we want to shift it to the right or the left, we can do that with the shift variable. We can also change the width of the line with the width variable. The material ID variable relates to which material to use for the line. By default, the center yellow lines are an ID of 1, and the white lines that are used for edges and lanes are an ID of 2. You can see how it gets that way by scrolling up and seeing the material list. If you were to replace one of these materials, the ID would change it to whatever is in the numbered slot. If you really wanted to, you can make a line with an ID of 0 and it would set it to the main road material. Not sure why you would want to do that, but you can. We also have options to cut off the line start and end. If we set the start cutoff to 1000, it will start the line 1000 centimeters or 10 meters later than it would have. It works the same way with the end cutoff. So let's set it to 200 and sure enough, it gets cut off. You could also set it to a negative number and it will extend past where it should be. And there's one advantage to doing this, and that is connecting to another road. Let me pull up the updated multi-lane map and show how the middle road expands from 1 lane to 2 lanes. The main road with 2 right lanes has a dashed line that extends backward, allowing a smooth transition into an expanding lane. If I were to set the negative start cutoff to 0, you would see a rather abrupt change into a new road. There are a couple of limitations to it being negative though, and that is that I can only go backward in a straight line and the elevation needs to not shift too heavily for the portion of the line that is going backward. This is a limitation for the time being, but we are working to make the backward spline follow the connected road spline to fix that problem. You may notice that this road has a dashed line, and if we go into the line option we can see dashed line gap ratio and dashed line distance is influencing it. The gap ratio option refers to how much of a gap should be between each line dash. A value of 0 or 1 will make a solid line like the ones we have seen before, but a gap of 0.25 equates to 75% of no line, followed by 25% of line, and we can adjust this to whatever fits our needs, but 0.25 I believe is the standard in the US. The 610 centimeter dash line distance I'm less sure of being a standard, but is good for demonstration. This distance is the amount of space from the beginning of one line dash to the beginning of another. That is all the individual options for road lines, but we have some others that make it easier to control other aspects of them. We already saw show center and white lines, but the show lane line option is new. If you have a specified number of lanes, this will automatically create white dashed lines between the lanes. If we go a bit lower, we can see the options called number of right lanes and number of left lanes, and this will dictate how many lines get created. It will also shift the center line automatically to maintain the correct proportions. The option above the show lane lines is the road line up offset, and this will just make the road lines appear higher off the road. You may notice one key difference from the previous version of this pack, and that is that the lines are now in 3D. I left a variable in the advanced section of the line options called Use Old Road Line Method, so that you can see what it was, but I highly recommend not to use it in production. Road lines used to be flat 2D polygons that hovered over the road, and while that worked alright for the most part, it had a fatal flaw. I wanted this update to have great nanite support, but if you were to bake a mesh with nanite and use these flat lines, you'll notice a problem. If we drag a nanite mesh in the scene using this method, it looks fine up close, but let's back up away from the mesh, and there it is. The lines have been eaten by the mesh. Why'd this happen? Nanite simplifies geometry as you get further away from the road, but since it is two separate pieces of geometry, they get simplified at two different rates until one piece of geometry gets simplified under or over the other mesh. The new line creation method doesn't have this problem because it gets combined into one piece of geometry. There are two modes the lines are made in. The first one is very fast to run, but not the best quality, and the second mode is very accurate, but also slow. We don't need it to be super accurate while we're editing it, so it is currently using the fast mode. It saves time by just appending the line mesh to the road mesh, and if you go into the road, you can see the extra geometry we get from doing this. However, if we click the advanced option of Use Quality Road Lines, it uses the slower but more accurate method. All the extra geometry is gone, and the road lines look really good. But to show off another key difference, we have a road that has one of those backward lines we talked about earlier, going into a road connection blueprint. Right now, it has quality lines enabled, but if we disable it, we can see the line goes under and over the road mesh, which would be no good. So I'm going to re-enable it. Another quality improvement of using the quality road lines is that it will adapt to your road grading. If we go to the end of this road and look at the non-quality road line, it shows clipping and one side is too far over the road and the other side is too far under. But when we use quality road lines, it adapts perfectly. I should say as well that whenever you go to bake your static mesh, it automatically uses the quality version of the road lines. You don't have to use the variable unless you want to see a preview of what it would look like. Well, that was a lot of information about road lines. Let's switch it up and talk about the new blueprint called BP MassRoadManager. Essentially, it allows you to edit or take certain actions of all the roads in the level. I'm going to make a copy of the overview level to show this off. By default, I think I have this blueprint in the level already, but if you need one in a new level, it is in the same folder as all the other blueprints. If I click on the blueprint, there are a lot of standard categories, and I don't know why this blueprint is special, but all the categories I set up are in the middle of the detail categories. Not sure why, but I guess this is one of those things why Unreal still calls the geometry script plugin in beta. But now that we can see the options, I'm going to start with the debug category called Print Road Count, and this will just give you a breakdown of all the types of roads in the level. This will be visible in the output log and might come up as an on-screen message. The next option is the Update All Roads button, and it will do as it says and update all the roads in your level, which could be useful if you change the landscape beneath the roads and you want them all to readjust. There are some other options that could be used with this as well. Reset Connections will do the equivalent of pressing the Reset Connection option on each road connection blueprint in the level, and the Update Road Resolution variable dictates the quality of the road resolutions in the level. This will be talked about more in the speed improvement section of the video, but in summary, this influences how many triangles the road is comprised of, and setting this to say 5 will make it have 5 times as many triangles compared to the resolution being set to 1. If I go into the view mode and select wireframe, you can see how many triangles the road uses to make its geometry. And if I update all roads with the new resolution being 5, you can see how much denser the mesh is. The cost of the increase of triangles is performance, so the user can set this to whatever they want. I had a viewer comment on a previous video asking what it would be like to run this on older hardware. I told them if their system runs Unreal Engine 5, it should be able to run this pack, but the roads may compile slower. So this is a method of making the whole pack run faster if you have all the roads set to lower resolutions while developing. and then the roads can get set to a higher resolution when baking the roads to static meshes, so you can get the best of both worlds. The last button in the debug category is the report road overlaps, and it will tell you which roads are overlapping each other. This information gets put into the output log. It does have an additional option of allow road overlap, and what it will do is allow roads to overlap one another by adding each other as an ignored actor when they snap to ground. That's it for the debug panel. Moving on to the baking panel. The main button of this panel allows you to bake all the dynamic roads in the scene to static meshes. It also has a few options to go along with it. The first option is to allow the newly created static meshes to be assigned the same materials as the dynamic mesh counterparts. The second option forces all the new static meshes to have nanite enabled by default, which offers a big performance boost since roads are very large static meshes and don't always need to be in the highest level of detail. The last option is the resolution multiplier. I previously mentioned that roads have resolutions that affect the triangle count. Well, this option allows you to bake it in a higher resolution without affecting the individual resolution variable on each road. Say if you have two roads at a resolution of 1 and 2, the roads will be baked to static meshes at a resolution of 2 and 4 respectively, if the resolution multiplier was set to 2 because it would make it 2 times its initial resolution. Now I'm going to demonstrate all this by baking all the roads to static meshes. This can take a while depending on your hardware, what resolution you set your roads to, and the number of roads you are baking. When it's done, it'll tell you how long it took to bake all the static meshes in the output log, and the actual static meshes will be placed in a folder called Road Static Meshes in your content folder. If you didn't have this folder before, you do now, and the folders in it are named off the level it's made in, and the assets are named the same as they appear in the level. But it would be a pain to replace all these roads in the level and move them so that they are in the exact same place as the dynamic roads, and that's why we have the option in the MassRoadManager that deals with replacing them. We even have an additional option to delete the dynamic road blueprints when we're done. Now I highly recommend you make a copy of your map with the dynamic meshes still in the level, because you may want to make changes later, and you can't do that with static meshes. Now if I press replace all dynamic with static, it kind of looks like nothing happened. But if we look at the outliner tab, with every actor in the level, all the blueprints of dynamic roads were replaced with static mesh equivalents. This means your road system is ready to be used in any game or project you are going to ship it in. And if you are really done and don't need any more changes, you could even uninstall the Geometry Script plugin and the Dynamic Road System pack, because you now have all the roads you need stored nicely in a separate folder. That's all for this new blueprint, so let's talk about the OSM integration improvements. I'll have a separate video posted in a couple of days after this one, going over everything specifically, but let me open the updated OSM map to show some improvements. In the last video I did, I showed how this automatically connects OSM roads together using the road connectors. But now it can also have lanes and the lines show off those lanes. Like I've said before though, I built this OSM converter from the ground up as a personal project, and it isn't 100% accurate, but it sure beats making all this from scrap. So with the rest of the OSM details being covered in detail in the next video, I'm going to move on to the performance improvements. Let me switch back to the multi-lane map. There is now a variable in every road blueprint under the dynamic section of the detail panel called resolution multiplier, and its function is to allow the user to have an influence on how many triangles the mesh is made up of. If we go into the view mode and select wireframe, we can see the triangle composition of this mesh. I'm specifically focusing on a road that has a lot of turning because the resolution difference is more noticeable. Now if we increase the multiplier all the way up to 5, we can see some difference in the mesh density, but not too much more noticeable quality when we switch it back to the normal lit mode. Let me adjust the resolution back to 1 so you can see the difference in lit mode, and it's a little bit worse now, but I promise it runs better. In fact, I coded a debug statement that would tell us the difference in execution time between the resolutions. At 1, it takes almost 10 milliseconds, which isn't bad. That means Blueprint could update 100 times per second, but that would also be assuming that it was the only thing being calculated in your level, which isn't the case. But we can see how long it takes to run at 5 times the resolution, and it spikes up to over 40 milliseconds. That would decrease your performance to 25 updates per second, which would feel sluggish. On the opposite side of the spectrum, we could set the resolution to 0.1, and just like that, only around 2 milliseconds of calculating. So this would be a really great option for those with older hardware or those that are editing massive road systems. However, I think you can already see the road visually looks not great, but that's okay since we are just editing. When you're ready to bake to a static mesh, the resolution can be set higher and it will look great. And a quick reminder that you can use the MassRoadManager blueprint to bake all your static meshes at once and use the resolution multiplier to temporarily increase your resolution just for the baking process. The default for this variable is set at 2, but that would result in 2 times 0.1, which is only 0.2 resolution. So you may want to increase this resolution multiplier to like 10 or 20 if all your roads are set at a similar low resolution. But, in summary, I recommend that you keep your road resolutions low while editing and high when baking to static meshes. If you have moderate to decent hardware, the default resolution should suffice for fairly large road systems. I also wanted to show that the road connection blueprint has been changed to where it is now made using 2 meshes combined, and you can see that if you lower the resolution. We made this design decision because the road would sink in the middle if any road grading was used, but now it can gradually shift from one road grading to another connected roads grading seamlessly. I bring this up now because the road resolution really affects how the visuals of the road connection look. You can see when we lower the resolution to 0.1, you can see holes and extreme oversimplification. But if you set the resolution appropriately, it will look a lot better. So now that that's covered, let's move on to the improvements to the baked static meshes. I showed earlier in the video that the new blueprint called MassRoadManager can automatically bake all your dynamic meshes to static meshes, but it can now also automatically make them nanite enabled. I'm going to use one of the meshes I baked and pull it into the scene and show how it is really hard to tell that it is nanite. You can back up from it and it stays just about the same. And if we look at it while using the nanite visualization mode, we can see how the geometry simplifies without losing much quality. In this update, we really tried to give the developers using this pack the best of both worlds. The performance gain while editing, the higher quality when baking, and now the simplified geometry of the static meshes. Other road packs on the Unreal Engine marketplace use landscape spline meshes that can't currently use nanite, or they are pre-made modular road packs that lack the versatility of fine-tuning the shape of your roads. If you have any other features that you think would make this the best road system in the marketplace, let me know. I have a few feature requests I'm either planning to make or looking into making, like curbs for roads or making them easily compatible with AI traffic systems. I actually have been testing that last one, but let's just say it may take some time. Alright, well that's it for the major features, but I want to quickly go over some of the smaller features that were added. It was hinted that some of the maps were updated, and that is true for the OSM map, multi-lane map, and the overview map. There was also a community report that said you couldn't properly rotate roads on the Z-axis, and that has been fixed. And lastly, there is now an option on all 3 road types to disable the road from automatically snapping to the ground. This was a longer video, so thank you for staying with me. I hope you are all able to utilize these new features. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them in the YouTube comments or on our Discord, which you can find a link for in the description of this video. Thank you all, and until next time.